On a warm summer afternoon in 1975, one of the most powerful men in America stepped out to attend what he believed was a routine meeting. He never came home. There was no struggle, no witnesses, no body. Nearly half a century later, his disappearance remains one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in American history. This is the story of Jimmy Hoffa. If you're drawn to real cases like this, stories that don't fade with time, you may want to subscribe. We explore true crime mysteries that still have unanswered questions. To understand Jimmy Hoffa's disappearance, you first need to understand the world he lived in. Detroit, Michigan, a city driven by industry, unions, and influence. In the mid-20th century, Detroit was not just the heart of America's auto industry. It was also a place where power operated quietly, behind closed doors. Labor unions controlled millions of workers. Billions of dollars moved through pension funds. And where that much money and influence existed, organized crime was never far away. Detroit was a city where business, politics, and the underworld often overlapped. Deals were made in private rooms. Loyalty mattered. Silence mattered even more. And in this world, one man rose higher than almost anyone else. James Riddle Hoffa was born in 1913. By his early 20s, he had already immersed himself in union organizing. Hoffa was aggressive, relentless, and fearless. He believed unions should fight and win at any cost. By the 1950s, Hoffa had transformed the Teamsters Union into one of the most powerful labor organizations in the United States. Millions of truck drivers answered to him. Entire industries depended on his decisions. To his supporters, Hoffa was a champion of the working class, a man who stood up to corporations and delivered better wages, benefits, and job security. To his critics, he was something far more dangerous. Federal authorities accused Hoffa of corruption, intimidation, and deep ties to organized crime. The Teamsters' massive pension fund became a key focus. Prosecutors believed mafia figures used it as a private bank to finance casinos, hotels, and illegal operations. Hoffa denied everything. But as his power grew, so did the number of enemies he made, in government, in rival unions, and even within his own organization. By the early 1960s, Jimmy Hoffa had become one of the most investigated men in America. The federal government was determined to bring him down. After years of surveillance, wiretaps, and courtroom battles, prosecutors finally succeeded. In 1967, Hoffa was convicted on charges of jury tampering and fraud. He was sentenced to 13 years in prison. For many, it marked the end of an era. Hoffa was removed from power. The Teamsters moved on without him. And the man who once controlled an empire now found himself behind bars. But Jimmy Hoffa was not finished. In December of 1971, after serving just under 5 years of his sentence, Jimmy Hoffa walked out of federal prison a free man. His release came through an unexpected source, a presidential commutation. President Richard Nixon had reduced Hoffa's sentence, but the deal came with a critical condition. Hoffa was forbidden from participating in union activities until 1980. On paper, it was clear. In reality, it was unacceptable to Hoffa. To him, the Teamsters Union was not just a job. It was his life, his identity, and his legacy. The idea that others now controlled the organization he built was deeply personal. Hoffa believed the restriction was unfair. He believed it could be challenged. And most dangerously, he believed he could reclaim what he had lost. The world Hoffa returned to was not the one he had left. During his time in prison, new leadership had taken over the Teamsters. Relationships had shifted, alliances had changed, and the underworld figures who once tolerated Hoffa's authority now saw him as a threat. Hoffa began speaking openly about his intention to return. He made phone calls. He met with former allies. And quietly, word spread that Jimmy Hoffa wanted his old position back. But for many powerful people, that could not be allowed to happen. Hoffa knew too much. He had been involved in too many deals, and if he returned to power, he could destabilize arrangements that had been carefully maintained in his absence. Behind the scenes, tension was growing. For years, investigators believed that organized crime figures had played a role in Hoffa's rise, and now, possibly, in his fall. The Teamsters Pension Fund had long been suspected of financing mafia-backed ventures, casinos in Las Vegas, construction projects across the country, businesses that required silence and cooperation. While Hoffa publicly denied any wrongdoing, private informants painted a different picture, one of mutual benefit, uneasy alliances, and strict boundaries. And those boundaries, according to some theories, were being crossed. Hoffa's push to regain power threatened to expose deals better left buried. By the summer of 1975, Hoffa believed a solution was finally within reach. He told family members that he was scheduled to meet two men, individuals he believed could help resolve his disputes and clear the path for his return. The meeting was set for July 30th at a familiar location in the Detroit suburbs, a restaurant parking lot. Hoffa left home that afternoon expecting a conversation, a negotiation, a breakthrough. What he did not know was that this meeting would mark the last confirmed sighting of him alive. Wednesday, July 30th, 1975. The day began like any other. That afternoon, Jimmy Hoffa left his home in Bloomfield Hills, Michigan, driving his maroon Pontiac Granville. He told his wife he was heading out to meet two men for lunch, a meeting he believed could resolve the disputes blocking his return to power. The meeting location was the Matches Red Fox restaurant, a well-known spot in the Detroit suburbs. Hoffa arrived shortly before 2 p.m. Witnesses later recalled seeing him pacing in the parking lot, checking his watch, waiting. At 2:45 p.m., Hoffa made a phone call from a nearby payphone. He called his wife and complained that the people he was supposed to meet had not shown up. That phone call would be the last confirmed contact anyone ever had with him. As evening approached, Hoffa still hadn't returned home. His family knew immediately that something was wrong. Later that night, police located Hoffa's car in the restaurant parking lot. It was unlocked. There were no signs of a struggle, no blood, no broken glass. Everything appeared normal except for one critical detail. Jimmy Hoffa was gone. Investigators would later say the scene suggested that Hoffa willingly got into another vehicle, someone he trusted, someone he didn't fear. The disappearance of Jimmy Hoffa triggered one of the largest missing person investigations in U.S. history. The FBI followed thousands of leads. Informants were questioned. Suspected burial sites were searched. Rivers were dragged. Fields were excavated. Even landfill sites were investigated. Over the years, tips poured in from across the country and beyond. Some were sincere, others were hoaxes. Many led nowhere. Despite decades of effort, not a single piece of physical evidence conclusively explained what happened to Hoffa. No body was ever recovered. As time passed, theories multiplied. Some believed Hoffa was murdered shortly after leaving the parking lot. Others claimed his body was destroyed to ensure it would never be found. Several individuals later claimed knowledge of the crime, but their stories often contradicted each other. Locations ranging from remote farmland to major construction sites were searched. None produced definitive answers. Each theory ended the same way, with uncertainty. And slowly, the case grew colder. In 1982, 7 years after his disappearance, Jimmy Hoffa was officially declared legally dead. But legally dead did not mean understood. Without a body, without proof, his disappearance remained unresolved, a mystery suspended in time. For investigators, it was a case that never truly closed. For the public, it became legend. Jimmy Hoffa once stood at the center of power. Unions, politicians, and criminal empires all intersected around him. Yet in the end, he vanished without a trace. No grave, no answers, only questions. And somewhere, the truth still waits, buried in silence.